in this period of time. And we can do this going forwards, but we have to do that with 80% less carbon in the system by mid-century as well. And even if you don't believe in being able to do that, even if you just say, okay, let's just hold carbon emissions flat while we grow, basically all growth from now on has to be zero carbon. So to look at the title of this conference, there really can't be any B that's not for E going forwards. And it's not just climate change. You look at any resource, they're really, all growth going forwards has to be low carbon.
When you confront this reality, is this something discouraging? How do you deal with this? Is this how do you stay optimistic in the midst of all this?
I mean, this may be a slightly heretical view, but our view is that there's a pretty small community of people within the world that can lead on this issue and can really set the momentum that we need. And it's going to be the main decision makers in society. So you could write a list of the main CEOs, environmental advisors, heads of state, heads of government in state and cities, the major states and cities, heads of media. These are the people that actually, within the scope that they have right now, can choose to lead on this issue. Yeah. And we believe that they have the scope to lead on this issue, and it's actually going to be the people largely who it's on their watch right now will choose to lead. And what we're starting to see now is actually the beginnings of this clean revolution, this new business models and new ways of leading business, which are compatible with the constraints and the challenges and the opportunities that we face in the next few decades. So I'm very optimistic about this challenge, and I think that leadership will diffuse within that community in much the same way that iPods diffuse within communities, actually. It's actually going to be profiling the people that are leading the way here, which is going to give this idea credibility and start to change mindsets. We talked about mindsets earlier, actually, and I think another positive thing from our perspective is that there's not really one mindset. It's not about trying to convert everyone to this mindset around business for the environment. You have to connect with the planet in some way to generate a green business model. There's probably 7 or 8 different ways as a business or government leader that you can generate the leadership within yourself and within your organization to do this, and it doesn't necessarily have to be values driven. So if you look at the people who are leading in this space around the world. What have you found
to be the most effective in your experience? What has worked well?
I mean, it's going to take leadership at many different levels, and if you think about how change happens, particularly within the business community and within government as well, you get big organizations that can make innovative moves forward, but then you also get disruptors who tend to be the smaller organizations that maybe have more flexibility to move that can do this. So depending on which sectors of the economy and which parts of the world you operate in, leadership takes different forms. I mean, you can look at, undoubtedly there are businesses where actually you have people tapping into their personal convictions on this. So you have companies like Interface who are led by someone who basically decides this is the way that we have to go. Yeah. But then you've equally got companies who are just tapping into their strategic assets on this. I mean, General Electric is a widely quoted example of a company where actually they're just geared up for the clean revolution. A large proportion of their capabilities and their assets and their products are actually energy reducing, and so Ecomagination is just a way of packaging that together in a way where green is green. It's actually just about good business for a GE. Right. There's a whole other range of there's also transformational business thinking, I think, as well. And we see this every day in China now, where companies like Broad Air Conditioning, that were an energy efficient air conditioning company 2 years ago, within the space of 18 months were moving into the green building sector and actually built their own energy efficient, earthquake proof 5-story pavilion at the Shanghai Expo in 24 hours. So you can log on to YouTube and see this. So there are companies there who are actually willing to think outside of the box a little bit. I mean, I'm guessing that this is probably how Tata grew. You look at Virgin, actually, if you have a brand and you have capability on good business, it doesn't mean that you have to stick to one particular sector. So being able to open up new business avenues, building off your brand. BYD, Chinese company, started off making batteries, now makes electric vehicles. Yeah. So being able to think transformatively about how your business and how that's going to fit into this coming few decades.
So it's really a variety of different things. Yeah.
There's a whole range. I mean, there are 7 or 8 habits of highly effective clean revolutionaries, if you will, that we believe.
It's a good book to write.
Really, and we will. So anyone interested in collaborating on the book, but it's a positive message because it means that you don't have to win people over to this concept of environmental sustainability in order to drive this. You've got people who are actually being just driven by business opportunity, by competitiveness, by energy security, by aligning those goals with development and lots of other issues. And it's that diversity which actually gives me cause for a lot of optimism right now.
So really to use that old TV program, different strokes for different folks, and hopefully those together lead to transformation.
I think that's right.
Well, any questions to Jim?
I think for you, would it not be right actually to the paradigm is shifting from economic competitiveness to ecological competitiveness? There is a big shift actually taking place because chasing capital is one thing, but chasing ecological resources which are scarce is another. So the whole paradigm, Michael Porter's own competitive theory itself will be questioned because it is back to the basics, which is land, labor, capital, and organization, with energy sitting there as the fifth dimension of the new world.
Yeah, I think that's inevitably the direction of travel that we have to recognize the real value of the resources that we're building the economy on. However, I think there's an interim step which is around mining the waste in the system that we've heard about a lot in the last couple of days. And if you take a barrel of oil, about 5% of the energy in that barrel of oil goes to propelling people around.
The rest is waste.
25% goes to propelling the car, but actually 75% generates hot polluted air, basically. So the internal combustion engine, which has been the incumbent technology since the turn of last century, and really hasn't moved a long way in terms of energy efficiency, is a 25% efficient system. So we are burning more than 5 billion barrels of oil a year to make hot polluted air, and very little of that is going to moving people around. So if you take that in the context of the challenges that we face in the next few decades, I think actually there's an interim step, which is just actually realizing the financial and economic value of things which we already know have financial and economic value, but just we need to think slightly differently about it. Lighting is the same. It's just a 1%, between 1 and 10%, depending on the technology, efficient system. LED lighting will be a big step forward.
Studies that show in the US, for example, per capita, every person in the country is associated with 1 ton of municipal waste. So really, it's this baggage you're carrying with you every year.
Yeah, I think food is the same. I believe it's about a third of food at some point gets lost in the system between production and consumption. Certainly in Europe, this is the case. So it's a big deal.
So let me ask this question then, and we'll, in a sense, have questions among ourselves. That's the suggestion given to me. What do you think? So we're moving towards a new way of managing, a new style of management, a new way of thinking of management. What do you think that is? What would be the characteristics of that new way of thinking of business itself? This is sort of the macro question. What do you, maybe in reverse order? Yeah.
Well, I think that thinking has to be about. It needs to be bold and transformational. We've heard quite a bit about targets. I think the importance of setting bold targets on where you want to go as an organisation really can drive innovation within the organisation. We've seen this in lots of different ways. When you've set a target for your client's energy efficiency. We ran a report series for the first 3 years that we set up as a climate group called Carbon Down, Profits Up, which basically documented hundreds of organisations out there that were reporting operational carbon reductions and growth in profit. So the message from that was actually just setting targets and getting going on this means that it's a bit like picking up $20 bills from the floor. Energy efficiency is a big opportunity, and that certainly gets you 10 to 20% of the way there before you even need to get into the world of transformational thinking. But setting big targets, I think, is an important part of that.
Why wouldn't it be that the governments and industry bodies set a target? Say, for example, on land, suppose you had land, 50% would be biodiversity covered in a factory wherever possible. Say for energy, 100% would be renewable by 2020. Say waste would be neutral, in other words, whatever waste you do, and water would be neutral. So I'm saying it is possible actually to have those targets and actually drive them from an economic perspective. And actually, if you really total that up, the sum total of that for organization, then going down to a county level, and then going up to a country level, would actually be not that difficult.
Yeah. So I want to change this a little bit. I think we need targets, but I think a fundamental shift in the way we do business is that we'll be doing it in a much more collaborative way, right? We talk about targets, we talk about collaborative public-private partnerships, but these are huge problems and opportunities, right? From a business perspective, you think of it as we may not have the resources